I'm your host, Lindsay Zubek. I am so excited here today. I have a very special guest. Joining me is Gabby Fish. She's a principal at the Plum Leadership Group. Gabby has over 20 years of experience across corporate, nonprofit, tech startups. She brings a real deep expertise in leadership development. Gabby holds an MBA from the Schulich School of Business, and she is a certified coach. She's also a board director, documentary enthusiast. She's passionate about nature travel. She's on her way to travel actually tomorrow. Welcome, Gabby.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Great to be here.
So excited to have you here, Gabby. And this is just on the cusp as we launch our manager development program that, as I mentioned in the intro, it really is one of your areas of specialty. It's what you're really known for. And why is that? What's the catalyst for this area of focus? Why has it been such a passion and interest of yours?
Sure. So I began my career in a really big bank, a very large corporate environment where anyone who was being promoted into a manager role went through this manager fundamentals program. And that's pretty common in really large organizations. And then I moved in my career to much smaller companies and organizations and medium size. I worked at a not-for-profit. I've worked with a lot of tech startups, and most of them don't have
Mm,
anything. We promote someone to be a new manager and we just wish them luck.
yeah.
There's not much support offered. I mean, of course, some organizations do better in this way, but by and large, sort of a lot of medium organizations do very little to support people moving into this new role. And I was really shocked and surprised. And then on the HR side, we see a lot of problems. We see a lot of managers that don't have really that fundamental knowledge and skill or really know what's expected of them. So what's really interesting is as I started my consulting career, I would be asked to do a lot of leadership development work with the senior team at organizations, with executives. So there was an investment happening at that level. And then I'd sort of probe a little bit about what they're doing at that emerging leader, new manager, frontline manager level. And it was nothing. It was nothing. And so yes, I fundamentally believe we need to invest in executive and leadership development at the higher levels of the organization. Leaders at that level cast a really long shadow. There's a really big impact. So we need to skill them up and develop them, but not at the expense of those new managers at the front line really impacting the employee experience. So that's why I'm so fired up about this. And that's why I think it's just so critical to support folks at this critical, pivotal stage in their career.
Absolutely. Yeah. We almost take for granted when we've come from a large organization. We've been through, I too have been through some amazing programs to develop managers. And then it's those smaller organizations, those startups, those other ones that don't necessarily have the infrastructure or the investment. But it is so important. When you walk into a restaurant, you feel the effects of the direct manager, even more so than like you said, the shadow that the senior
A
managers
senior,
cast.
yeah.
And so, what do you think are some of the foundational skills that those new managers need to develop?
Yeah. So, okay. So fundamentally, I think that this is a philosophy that I hold, being a people manager, someone who leads a team, is about two core things. It's about performance and it's about development. It's about getting the job done and it's about growing your people. So that's a fundamental belief. And that's the spirit and the angle that I come at all this from. So with that, I really think that there's a few things that are really, really core and that we really focus on in our fundamentals or essentials of people management. So the first thing is feedback. So this is a sweet spot for me. I love the area of feedback. There's so much to delve into and to help people get good at this. And so I really think that understanding being skillful at feedback, both appreciative and constructive feedback, positive and negative, that's really, really important. I mean, there's so much in this realm of feedback. So that's one bucket that I think is critical to help support people early on. The next one is a much more tactical piece, which is optimizing one-on-one meetings. So I go into a lot of organizations where they're not having one-on-ones. They say, like, I check in with my team regularly. I'm right here sitting beside them. We don't need one-on-ones. I feel differently. I think there's so many important things you get from dedicated connection time one-on-one, much more
Mm,
than what are you working on? Are you on track? So there's a lot to think about and to consider to really optimize one-on-one meetings that can
mhm,
happen weekly or biweekly. The next one would be delegation. That's a really critical one. And there is some, methodology and some kind of helpful mindset and approaches to delegation. The most critical one, I think, is this mindset of short-term pain for long-term
mhm.
gain.
Yes.
It can be really hard to delegate a task or to teach someone how to do something. So often managers will say, it's just easier for me to do it myself,
Yeah.
right? It's just faster. It's just faster if I do it myself. Like, hear that so often,
Mm,
but that's not helping people grow. And that's not helping you in the long run get to that higher order thinking and higher order work. So there's really good methodologies and frameworks and approaches to delegation that we really help people with. Next one would be the fundamental idea that we as leaders need to flex our style
mhm.
to adapt to different people that we're working with, different employees, and different contexts. So, a real old school perspective is a manager has a style and everyone has to fall in line and work with that.
Yep.
But there's a lot of social science research out there, and there's a lot of the whole idea of situational leadership is that no, to help people thrive and succeed,
Mhm.
we need to change our approach based on circumstance. So that's another fundamental area of content. And then the final one, I mean, there's a lot, but just the
Yep.
core ones I'll say is taking a coaching approach. Really, that's fundamental in this idea that we are here to help people grow and develop, not only just make that widget.
Mm.
So a coaching approach is really about listening and asking questions as opposed to making decisions and giving answers and directing, right? How do we shift from maybe what we've been taught and what we have
Mhm.
grown up thinking leadership is to a different approach? So there's lots to dig into in those kind of core domain areas.
Can we talk a little bit more about feedback?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
So I got really interested in this. I call it 8 or 9 years ago when I
Mm,
was in house and I had a head of learning and development role. And I was asked by a team to find a workshop on feedback for them. And I scoured the landscape and I kept finding things, and this was for an entire team. Okay.
mm,
And I kept finding things that was for managers, right? How do managers deliver better feedback? And that's great and that's necessary, but that's just one dimension of
mm,
getting good at feedback or building a real feedback culture, which is where we really hit it out of the park when we really have
mm,
that cultural element. So I decided to just design and develop a workshop myself, and I did tons of research, and I've been iterating and growing it ever
mhm,
since. And it's really based on neuroscience, the idea of the brain's threat response. Like that is
mm.
what trips us up so
Yeah.
often around feedback. We're nervous that someone's going to get upset, or
Mm,
when we're receiving feedback, we get hijacked and don't respond in a really thoughtful way because, the threat response has been triggered, that fight, flight, or
the amygdala. We're thinking from the
yeah,
amygdala instead of the cerebral cortex. So,
exactly. So the approach that I've designed and really
mm,
love to share is that brain friendly way to
mm,
circumvent the threat response so that fundamentally, when we're delivering feedback, we're really just wanting people to hear it and
mm.
consider it. And then ultimately, it's up to them what they do with it.
Right.
Anything, it's feedback is an offer, feedback is a
Mm.
perspective. Someone can choose to heed it or not. But as a giver, you want to deliver it in the most skillful way that allows people to hear it and consider it.
Totally.
So,
And it's creating safety too, right? So that
yes.
they can receive it in a way that isn't threatening. Like, how do you create that container of safety?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different nuggets, but one of the things to your point is I really think about kind of a bank account almost like when you put goodwill in the bank,
Mm,
it's like
yeah.
positive feedback. Make sure people know what's going well.
Mm,
Make sure people know what you appreciate about their contributions, how they show up, right? What it is they do,
mhm,
so that when you have something constructive, when you need to give some tougher feedback, there's some goodwill in the bank as a cushion, right? So
yep,
it's not this feeling of I only ever hear from you when something's wrong. You never
yeah,
notice the good things I do. And
mhm,
that is a complaint I've heard plenty of times. There's a whole school of thought out there amongst old school managers that like, that's your job. I don't have to
mm,
thank you or appreciate for you for doing your job. But the brain thinks differently.
yeah,
In terms of safety, know that we are appreciated and that people notice the good that we're doing, and our efforts really lowers that nervous system response and
mm,
creates that safety so that we can more readily accept and hear and consider the
mm.
critical feedback.
I
So that's
love the idea of that, putting credits in the bank, building up that credibility. Can we talk for a second about making sure that we separate that building credits in the bank separate from the sandwich approach?
yes.
Mm.
So people always talk about the sandwich approach.
Yeah.
Um, Here's my perspective, and not everyone agrees.
Mm.
My perspective is that it's okay to have an open faced sandwich.
They can
It
be
is
great.
okay to say what's going well,
Mm,
what you appreciate, what went really well. And then here's an area I think we need to work on. Here's where you missed the mark. I think that's okay. The sandwich, the full sandwich approach is something good.
mm,
Here's something that didn't go well, and then something good. And so
right.
there, the balance is on the good. And so the risk is that the part that needs development or needs work gets lost. The impact is diminished, and all the person walks away from it's going well. I'm doing great. It's all about what's your key message. If you want to give
Mm,
balanced feedback, maybe that's okay. But if your key message is something that needs improvement, something the person has to fix, then we want to make sure that stands out and that remains
mm,
salient. So sometimes that might mean having a standalone conversation just for that, but sometimes it might be okay to say, this is what's going well and here's what needs work. But
mm.
it's almost like the balance. Like if we overdo the balance of the positive, then that's what maybe the person walks away with. So I'm not totally opposed in certain circumstances to an open faced sandwich.
Yeah, yeah, a deconstructed, right? We want that flavor of whatever it is to be,
Yes,
tasted and savored and appreciated, not mixed in so that you don't know what flavor you're tasting, to use that
exactly.
sandwich analogy.
It,
Yeah.
it's a risk, right?
Yeah.
If you mix it up, you risk the message being watered down and not heard well, not considered well.
So a lot of this, what we've talked about, all the components of leadership, all the components of manager essentials and foundations. What about for those managers and they haven't received training? When is it too late?
Yeah, that's a great question because frankly, I don't think it's too late. In terms of this open program we're doing, we call it new manager training, but I know that we're going to have folks that have maybe been in their role for a couple of years and they just never received any foundational training, and I think that's okay because they still need it. They've
Right.
been figuring it out, but it can be really helpful to go back to some frameworks. What we cover a lot are some really helpful mental models,
Mm,
frameworks, approaches. We also really, in these kinds of programs, we really leverage the peer to peer discussion. And so,
mm,
actually having people in the group that have actually had a couple of years in trial and error sharing their perspectives and their experiences also enriches the dynamic of the group as well.
absolutely. And a refresher for some of us, right? That it might have been a long time since and concepts, research, science, it's
Yeah.
all evolved and changed, as you've said, over the years. And we are constantly, especially at Plum throughout the industry, we're constantly tweaking, evolving our approach. If we were to have done the session 10 years ago, sandwich approach was probably something that was taught. So it's also important that managers who have been in the industry for a long time, they refresh their skills, they
Yeah.
update their skills. There's always something new that you can benefit of, especially like you mentioned in that MBA style type of cohort where you're really getting benefit from other people's industry, their perspective, their experience, their mistakes, their successes, all of it is really beneficial. Yep.
Totally. And that coaching approach is also something that's pretty new.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You've run these workshops for years, Gabby, for many years now. What would be a tip or something that someone from one of your workshops has really loved? What would be some transformational tips you could say that you've shared from your workshops?
So there are a bunch. One in particular comes to mind, and this is in the feedback portion. It's the idea that when we have some feedback to give someone, whether it's a peer, a manager, or a direct report, starting well means,
Mhm.
in my perspective, through all the research I've done, means giving an opportunity for self-generated feedback. So
Mhm.
let me explain. Let's say someone's been delivering a weekly report, and there's been a lot of errors, there's been a lot of mistakes, it hasn't been coming in on time, so things aren't going well, and it's been, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks. And you need to give that person some really direct feedback about this is not going well. You have some direct feedback for them, constructive feedback. If you just dive in to say, hey, Lindsay, this isn't going well. There's been too many errors. This is not acceptable. We have to fix this. So that's option A.
Mhm.
Option B is me giving the opportunity to you
Mhm.
to self assess how it's going. So if I say, Lindsay, it's been about 6 weeks since you've been delivering the weekly reports. How are you finding it? How are you feeling
Mhm.
about things?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not feeling great. I don't think they've been delivered. Yeah. It like
Right.
totally changes the way that, when you first said that, Gabby, the first point of like, hey, it's not going well. I was like getting to, you can't, for those of you who are listening and not watching, like my body language
Tense,
was like,
right?
I was
Tense.
defensive. I was tense versus when you ask me a question, it gives me a chance to be open, to add meaning into dialogue, add some context, some background. So it
Totally.
makes me feel
Your
engaged.
perspective.
Yeah.
Exactly. And through that, it's not only a ploy, it's
Mhm.
actually an opportunity to hear what's going on for you.
Mm.
There could be lots of interesting reasons that I haven't fully appreciated for what's going on. There could be tons of things I don't know. And I got to tell you, that's often the case.
Right.
It's often the
Yes.
case. There's things that you don't know that are getting in the way, that
Mm.
are, competing priorities of some kind. So creating that space
Mm.
for self-generated feedback is a real element of autonomy and choice that can simmer down that threat response. So that's
Yeah.
a really valuable way. Like, let's say you're in a client meeting with one of your direct reports, and they didn't explain something well, or they got defensive maybe in the meeting, and you leave the meeting and you want to debrief. You might
Yeah.
say, how are you feeling about that meeting, and let them say how they're feeling, and then it gives you, as a feedback giver, you then have the decision if they've really acknowledged it, what you were going to share, if they
Mm.
get it and they're already on their way to rectifying or remedying it. Maybe you don't need to add fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Maybe the intended impact has been made. Maybe you can just be supportive in helping them
Mm.
remedy or fix
Mhm.
it or get better. So you can decide. But if let's say the person says, I think it's fine. I think everything's going fine.
Mhm.
Then you've given them a chance, and you can then proceed with your core message of what
Mm.
you wanted to deliver. But giving that chance has a real opportunity to tone down that threat response.
Absolutely. And it almost tones down the giver. Like instead of coming in that here's the script that I'm gonna say, you come in as a dialogue. You come in to,
Curious.
collaboratively solve the problem with curiosity. And it changes the way that you as a manager, even your energy, your approach, the words that you use, it changes the whole relationship that you have.
Totally. The
Yeah.
dynamic in
Yeah.
the conversation. Yeah.
So something that I've heard through, from leaders who haven't been through manager training and they feel like they've gotten to a place where they're managing just fine. They didn't need the training. What advice or feedback would you have to them in terms of them encouraging they're now managers underneath them to participate in a program like this.
Right. Yeah. Like, I didn't do this and I turned
Yeah.
out just fine. So there are lots of things. It's not like anyone who doesn't get manager training early on is doomed. Of
Right.
course not. Of course not. They could have figured out themselves. They could have really great instincts.
Mm,
They could have had great role models above
mm,
them to know what
mhm,
to do and what not to do. They could have read up on things. There's lots of ways leaders can succeed without this formal training, but we don't know. That's not necessarily the case 100% of the time. So it is taking a chance. It
mm,
is taking a risk. And so the risk is that bad habits will develop. People, some of the bad habits we see a lot with managers are avoiding difficult conversations,
yep.
avoiding tough decisions,
Mm,
sometimes about letting people go that are real
mhm,
detriment to the team, and just like not understanding, like staying too high above here, not
mm,
understanding the processes and the dynamics and maybe conflicts within the team, all sorts of things that are not helpful and can be really bad habits that people fall into.
mm,
And so that's the risk. If we can guarantee that everyone is going to go on the right course without this manager development, amazing. But we don't have that guarantee. And
mm.
we do know the adage that rings true to a lot of people, that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers,
Yes.
right? I
Yep.
don't think it's news to a lot of us that there's a lot of not highly skilled managers out there,
Mhm.
that can be sometimes toxic, that can be sometimes neglectful, that aren't helping people grow and develop. So there's a lot of risk to not, having something consistent, setting people up for success. It doesn't mean
Totally.
100% of the time they won't succeed,
Mm, mhm.
but it's a great proactive measure to offer folks.
Absolutely. It's a great insurance plan, really. So the risk of not only just impacting the people that might leave, but impacting your customers, impacting your clients, impact like the ripple effect on your bottom line is potentially huge. So why not proactively protect, develop, train your most important asset that can really drive ROI for your business and drive results? So now we're going to head into my favorite little section called the lightning round. I'm going to ask you a
Okay.
couple questions. Gabby, whatever comes first to the top of your head. And my first question, I'm so interested to hear your answer because I know you are so well read. What is your favorite leadership book, podcast, resource? What's your go-to?
Okay. To go with the work of Dr. David Rock, his seminal book, Your Brain at Work, and his company, the Neuro Leadership Institute. They offered amazing webinars, amazing podcasts and articles. Everything is from a neuroscience lens, everything
Mm,
that they do. And they have a journal, scientific journal as well. So I just love all their work because it's really about how our brain works and what we can, knowing that, how do we optimize organizational life
mm.
as a whole? So I love his work. I highly recommend everyone
Oh, I'm going
checking
to
it out.
put that on my list. And who's a leader that you admire?
What's coming to mind is someone I worked with. He led some large businesses back at the bank that I worked at years ago.
Mm,
And what really stood out with him is just his he was a great listener, a great
mm,
listener. He was a very senior exec. He really heard and considered different perspectives and then was decisive.
mm,
So people felt like their perspectives were heard and considered, even if he didn't go with them.
mm.
He gave people that sense that he was taking in the input, and the result was he was very well respected, really smart and credible. And another thing that really stood out for me was he just would sometimes roll up his sleeves and do things that you wouldn't think a very senior bank exec would do. There was this one instance where we were working on redesigning a sales compensation plan, and there was a lot of back and forth happening with the compensation team, our project team, the business, everything. And then one day he sent me this like one pager with like a different approach with these charts and tables and analysis. And I'm like, who put this together? Who did this? And he's like, I did. And that was pretty rare. That was
Yeah.
pretty rare and unique. And it really stuck with me. And what I love is that I've actually remained friends with him 20
Oh,
years later. And he's a wonderful person.
oh, that's amazing. The listening piece, I would say if I was to think of some of the most influential leaders that I've ever had the privilege of working with or seen their leadership style, it's that listening. And it
Yes.
makes you feel so valued, so
Yes.
heard. So outside of leadership development, what do you do in your spare time to recharge, Gabby?
Well, what's coming to mind is nature. Like I love walking. That's why it's so hard here in Toronto right now.
Mm.
It's so cold. So I've been missing my walks. I really love, if I can't be in nature in a forest or in
Mm,
a ravine, just walking around my neighborhood, I really have come to need that and love it. And what's actually really important is no stimulation, no external
mm,
stimulation, like
yeah. No screen.
no screen and I do love podcasts, I do love
Mm,
music, but I've come to
mm,
appreciate nothing coming at me in those periods and just having more time without stimulus
mm.
coming at me. So
It's
that's
so
one.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
The
hard to
other
do.
one would be journaling. And
Mm,
that's one I recommend all the time to my coaching clients. Journaling, just like writing, is a very helpful way for me and for many people to make sense of their thoughts and clarify my thinking, clarify my feelings. I use a self-coaching technique where I like have a question that is my coach and then
mm,
I write it out. So just every once in a while when I feel like really overwhelmed and busy, if I can remember to do some journaling, it helps everything settle.
yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of research that shows that when you write something down, whether you're writing down a goal or something you want to achieve or something reflective, it's far more likely to stick, even more so than typing it into a phone or typing it into a computer. It's that actual act of
Physical, yeah.
physically writing. There's far more connection to it.
No, and I
Yeah.
really have felt that. I've really felt that.
Yeah. So, my last question, it's one of my favorites. I'm always very interested in leadership habits. What's one habit that you think has made you a better leader?
I think I'm going to come back to that listening piece. When I went through my coach training well over 10 years ago now, 12 years ago, that really helped me become like such a better listener and question asker. I think a lot of us in life, just as adults develop, go through a point. Not everyone does,
Mm,
but I have, been through an evolution from being needing to be the person with all the ideas and the
yeah.
smart, question and the solution and showing that I'm smart to helping others shine and helping others come to insight. And of course, we do that as a coach, but that has been something I've incorporated into other parts of my life. So shifting from I have the ideas
Yes.
to helping others come to that.
Well, thank you so much, Gabby.
Thanks for the opportunity to chat.
If you've ever found yourself thinking, how do we actually get better as an organization? Here's a simple place to look: your managers. Managers have an outsized impact on performance, culture, and whether people stay or leave. But most managers are promoted because they're good at their job, not because anyone taught them how to manage people. That's exactly why we created Manager Essentials. Manager Essentials is a 100% online program designed to support new and emerging managers with real training and one on one coaching. It helps strong performers step into people management with more capability and less guesswork. If you're interested in developing managers who can handle the day to day realities of leading people, you can learn more at plumleadershipgroup.com. Thanks for tuning in to Grown to Lead, a podcast by the Plum Leadership Group. You can find even more insight and conversation like this one on LinkedIn from the Plum Leadership Group or on Instagram at Plum Leadership. Hear new episodes when they're available by following Grown to Lead wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, you are a masterpiece and a work of art at the same time.